I found it under 3 tons of broken metal on a Tuesday. I was not supposed to be there. The crash site sat at the edge of the Ashweld Flats, a stretch of pale dust that smelled like burnt copper and old rain. The Valen Compact had already sent their response team that morning. I had watched them from a distance. 6 officers in silver suits, moving fast and writing things on their data slates. They were thorough, professional, and completely uninterested in anything that was still breathing. I waited until they left. Then I crossed the flat. The Hatchling was buried beneath the belly of a collapsed transport shell, a Dravhari cargo vessel that had come down nose first from low orbit. The Dravhari are dragon kind, the oldest recognized species in the compact, enormous and ancient, and respected in the way that very old, very powerful things tend to be respected. Their young, even newly hatched, are considered Empire property, living history, cultural treasures. You are not supposed to touch them without 3 forms of authorization and a witness from 2 separate species councils. I did not have any of that. What I had was a field kit, a headlamp, and the sound of something breathing wrong on the other side of the wreckage. It took me 40 minutes to clear enough debris to reach it. The Hatchling was about the size of a large dog, covered in dark green scales that had not yet hardened into the deep obsidian they would become in adulthood. One wing was pinned under a beam. The other was folded tight against its body, like it was trying to make itself smaller. Its back legs were completely still, not resting, not tucked. Still in the way that scared me the moment I saw it, because I knew what that kind of stillness usually meant. I ran a quick scan with the medical sensor on my kit. The results came back in seconds. Cervical spinal compression at the 3rd junction, complete signal interruption below the thoracic region. The back half of its body had no connection to its brain anymore. The compact officers had seen the same data. That was why they had left. They had logged it as non-viable and moved on. I sat back on my heels in the dust and looked at the Hatchling for a long moment. Its eyes were open. The pupils were thin vertical lines, tracking me with something that was not quite fear and not quite trust. Just watching, waiting to see what I would do next. I opened my kit and got to work. My name is Dr. Sable Marin, and I am a human xenobiologist with a secondary certification in field medicine. I have worked on Karath 7 for 9 years, most of that time running a small salvage-adjacent research post on the Ashweld Flats. Humans are not a recognized species under compact law. We are what the official documents call a pre-integration population, which is a polite way of saying we exist here on borrowed permission. We have no diplomatic representatives. We have no legal standing in Empire courts. We are tolerated the way a minor inconvenience is tolerated, because we tend to be useful and because removing us would cost more effort than leaving us alone. I had spent 9 years learning to be useful enough to stay. The technique I used on the Hatchling was not invented by me. It came from Earth, from a century of quiet, unglamorous research done by doctors who spent their careers trying to help people whose spinal cords had been damaged beyond what any existing treatment could fully repair. The Valen Compact was brilliant at regeneration. They could grow new organs from a single cell sample. They could clone an entire limb in 6 days and have it functioning on the 7th. But neural bridging was a human specialty, born from necessity, refined over decades in small research hospitals on a planet no one else in the galaxy had cared about yet. The idea was simple, even if the execution was not. You could not always fix a broken spine, but you could, under the right conditions, build a detour around it. Biomimetic filament scaffolding, laid along the surviving nerve clusters above and below the injury site, connected by a bioelectric relay that learned the body's own signaling patterns and started completing them. It did not restore what was lost. It rerouted around it. Given time, given careful calibration, the body sometimes forgot it was supposed to be unable to move. I had done this procedure 4 times on humans, never on a Dravhari. The nervous system architecture was different enough that I spent the first 3 hours of that night building a translation model on my data slate, while the Hatchling watched me from beneath the debris, too exhausted to do anything except breathe. When I finally reached for it, it snapped at me, caught the sleeve of my jacket, not my hand, and held on for a moment before letting go. I took that as a reasonable response from a creature in severe pain that had no reason to trust me. I moved slowly after that, narrating everything I was doing in a low, even voice, the way I used to talk to frightened patients who did not speak my language. The tone matters more than the words. bodies no calm. By morning, the first filaments were in place. I named the hatchling Veth. It was a word from Old Dravhari root tongue that meant stubborn one, and it seemed appropriate. Veth did not make anything easy. Every calibration session was a negotiation. Every adjustment to the relay required me to be faster than the response time of a juvenile dragon who had decided that the safest reaction to discomfort was to try to remove my arm. I learned to read the warning signs, the specific darkening of the crest scales, the way the pupils contracted before a strike. I learned to work around them. Slowly, the warnings started coming less often. I kept a log. Entry 14, Veth ate without being coaxed today. Entry 21, left rear limb registered micro-movement at 0340 hours, duration 4 seconds. Entry 28, Veth let me touch the injury site directly for the first time. No warning signs. Just watched me with those vertical pupils and breathed. I sat with my hand on the base of its spine for a long time, feeling the faint hum of the relay doing its careful, patient work, and I thought about all the people on Earth who had made this possible, all the researchers and the patients who had tried, and sometimes failed, and kept trying anyway, and I felt something very large and very quiet move through me. Entry 37. I was running the morning calibration when Veth shifted, not a micro-movement, not a reflex twitch registered by a sensor, a full, deliberate shift of weight, both rear legs adjusting beneath its body. I stopped typing. Veth looked at me. Then it stood up. The gait was uneven. The neural bridge was not elegant. It was a workaround, built in emergency conditions with field equipment, and it would need months more refinement before it would be anything close to natural. But all 4 legs were on the ground. Veth walked across the floor of my station, turned around with the careful concentration of something relearning what its body could do, and came back to sit at my feet. Not because I told it to, because it wanted to. I went into the back room and cried for about 6 minutes. Then I washed my face and came back out and pretended none of that had happened. Veth watched me with an expression I was starting to recognize as something like knowing. Word travels fast in the flats. I did not intend for anyone to see Veth walking. But a Dravhari elder named Thresh Khan was conducting a routine territorial survey 3 days later and spotted a hatchling that her clan's records listed as deceased. She did not file the standard report. She went directly to the Throne Council. Within 2 days, I had 3 separate groups trying to reach me. The first was the Compact's Bureau of Biological Assets, who wanted to discuss my unauthorized interaction with Empire property and the legal implications thereof. The second was a Dravhari clan representative named Sovo Ren, who arrived at my station door and stood there for a full minute without speaking, looking at Veth, before finally asking, very quietly, what I had done and how. The third was a human liaison officer named Oren, a woman I had met briefly at a Compact administrative event years ago, who called me on a secure channel and told me in a flat, urgent voice to sign nothing and say nothing until she arrived. Oren sat across from me in my station, with her hands folded and her expression carefully controlled, and told me exactly what the Bureau wanted. Not to punish me. That was what surprised me most. They wanted the technique, documented, signed over, attributed to the Compact's Medical Research Division under a species integration agreement that would, in the fine print, erase my name from it entirely. In exchange, they were offering legal standing, a citizenship tier, relocation off Karath 7, and a research stipend. I listened to all of it. Then I said no. Oren stared at me. Then she said I was being the most spectacular kind of foolish she had ever personally witnessed. She had spent 20 years building a life inside Compact systems, learning to work with the rules as they existed, rather than as she wished they were, and she genuinely believed she was trying to help me. You healed 1 dragon, she said, and now you want to negotiate with an interstellar empire. Sign it. Take the citizenship. Get out, while they are still pretending to be polite. If I sign it, I said, the technique disappears into the Bureau's archive, and they decide who it gets used on and when. It will never reach the people it should reach. She looked at me for a long time. That is probably true, she said. It does not change your options. It changes what I do with them, I said. The Compact did not request my presence before the Throne Council. They summoned me. There is a difference. And the difference is that one comes with an armed escort and a Compact cruiser at the door. I walked out of my station to meet them. Veth walked out behind me. I had not asked it to come. It simply followed, the way it had started following me everywhere in the last week. The particular loyalty of a creature that has decided, for its own reasons, that you are the person it has chosen. When Veth stepped onto the transport behind me, every compact officer on board went very still. A Dravhari hatchling boarding a compact vessel uninvited is not a minor incident. It is an ancient rite written into the foundational agreements between the Dravhari clans and the empire they had chosen to join. Clan bond declaration. Public, witnessed, irreversible. By the time we reached the council chambers, the Bureau's carefully prepared legal framework had a very large and very old problem sitting in the middle of it, looking unimpressed. I stood before 12 seated representatives of 12 species, 2 of them so old their evolutionary history predated human writing, and I made my offer. I would publish the technique in full, openly, without restriction, attributed properly to Earth's century of spinal cord research, available to every medical practitioner in the compact and beyond. In exchange, I wanted 3 things: formal recognition of human medical expertise as a protected research discipline, legal standing for human practitioners on all compact worlds, and Veth's full Dravhari clan registration with no empire claim attached. Before any of the council could respond, Thresh Khan spoke. She addressed the chamber in Old Tongue, her voice low and measured, and the translation came a few seconds later through the room's audio system. "We declared this young one non-viable," she said. "We logged it and we left. A creature with no standing, no clan, no treaty, no history on this world, and no reason beyond its own nature to care, did not leave. Before we speak of what we will give, we should speak of what we owe." The chamber held a silence that felt like something very heavy being set down carefully. They agreed to the terms. Not unanimously, not warmly, not without 3 hours of procedural debate that I sat through on a bench with Veth asleep across my feet. But they agreed. Oren found me afterward in the corridor outside the chamber. She did not say I had been right. She stood next to me for a moment, watching the council members file out, and then she said, "I forgot you could do that." "Do what?" I asked. "Just keep going," she said, "when it is obviously hopeless." She left without waiting for an answer. I thought about that for a long time on the transport back to the flats. That was a year ago. Veth is considerably larger now, approaching adolescent size, the dark scales hardening into something that catches the light differently depending on the angle. The gait is still slightly compensated, probably always will be. It does not seem to bother Veth in the slightest. Nothing seems to bother Veth very much, as long as I am somewhere nearby. I have received contact from 11 xenobiologists on 7 different worlds. All of them are working cases, the Empire classified as non-viable. All of them want to know how the bridge is built. I answer every message, and I answer it completely, and I make sure my name is on every document so that no one can make it disappear. The compact has not made things simple. There are still forms, still delays, still moments where the bureaucracy moves like something designed specifically to discourage the people inside it. That part has not changed. But 37 days after I found a paralyzed hatchling under 3 tons of broken metal, it stood up and walked back to me and sat at my feet. And every time something in the galaxy tries to remind me how small I am, and how little standing I have, and how many rules say I should not be here, I think about that moment. I was not supposed to be there that Tuesday. I did not have the authorization, or the paperwork, or the recognized status to do what I did. What I had was the knowledge, the kit, and the willingness to stay when everyone else had already decided to leave. Out here, that turns out to be enough.